Mirasee.
A lot of times people can be living on autopilot, just going through the motions, maybe living according to other people's expectations or agendas. And journaling puts us in direct contact with our own desires, our own instincts, our own impulses for what feels important in our lives. And it gives us the confidence to actually live according to them.
Hi, I'm Dr. Irena O'Brien, and you're listening to Neuroscience of Coaching. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist with almost 30 years of study and practice in psychology neuroscience. And as the founder of the Neuroscience School, I teach coaches and other wellness professionals real-world, evidence-based strategies to use in their own practices. In each episode, I invite a seasoned coach to discuss a topic that affects our field, and together, we provide you with science-based tools to help your clients reach their goals by working with their brains to create results that last. Today, we're exploring a deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful tool, journaling. While many think of journaling as a creative outlet or a way to vent emotions, neuroscience shows it's much more than that. Writing by hand, especially when we reflect on our thoughts and feelings, can change how our brains process stress, support emotional regulation, and even increase our capacity for joy. Research shows that expressive writing activates regions of the brain involved in emotional processing, language, and memory, including the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. And this activity helps us name and organize difficult emotions, which lowers activity in the brain's threat response system and increases cognitive clarity. Simply put, when we write about what hurts, our brain is able to calm down and sort it out. But the real magic happens when journaling moves beyond venting into reflection. Neuroscientists have found that reflective writing boosts self-awareness, our ability to notice patterns in our thinking, behavior, and emotions. This matters because higher self-awareness is linked to everything from better decision-making to increased empathy, stronger relationships, and greater life satisfaction. In fact, rereading past journal entries can help us reframe painful experiences and recognize growth we may have otherwise missed. And it's not just psychological. These shifts show up physiologically. Studies reveal that regular journaling can lower cortisol levels, improve immune function, and even support heart rate variability, a marker of nervous system resilience. It's one of the few practices that is both emotionally soothing and mentally energizing. So today, we'll take a closer look at how journaling actually rewires the brain for resilience and joy, and how anyone can tap into its benefits with just a few minutes a day. My guest is Lynda Monk. Lynda is a pioneer in the field of journaling for transformation. As director of the International Association for Journal Writing, she has helped thousands tap into the therapeutic and creative potential of writing. She brings more than 30 years of expertise in coaching, social work, and burnout prevention. Her message is clear. Journaling isn't just reflective, it's regenerative. Lynda, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Irena. I'm excited to talk about journaling.
So am I. So let's start by sharing with us a little background on what led you to focus on journaling in your work. Was there a particular experience you had?
Yeah, it really happened in the first 10 years of my social work career. I was working in trauma-informed work, lots of crisis intervention. I worked in child welfare, child protection. I worked in children's mental health. I did a lot of work in the area of suicide intervention. I worked as a medical social worker. And when I did my Master's of Social Work studies, this is a long time ago now, back in 1995 to 98, I focused on the area of burnout prevention. I wanted to know how, as a helping professional, do we get out of bed every day to help other people, often in times of crisis and distress? How do you do that and be exposed to all of that emotion, difficult stories, painful experiences, and still stay healthy? I was aware that burnout was an occupational hazard, so were things like vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and I wanted to know how to prevent those things. And when I was doing those studies, I kept coming across information that would talk about the importance of reflective practice. That if we have a regular way to reflect about our own thoughts and feelings as a helper, that it can help build our resilience and well being and be an important part of our self care. And journaling was often mentioned as a way to engage in reflective practice. And I was already a journal writer. I had journaled on and off through all of those early years as a social worker, but I knew the value of it. I knew the simplicity of it. And I thought, that's my secret sauce. That's how I'm going to be in this career for many years and stay healthy doing it. It was really that moment of realizing that something I already had in my self care toolkit was actually something that was being recommended in the research as being helpful. And a light bulb went on, and I thought, I'm going to really stick with this and learn as much as I can about how to write for well being, not just my own, but I wanted to share it with fellow social work colleagues and other helping professionals as something that could perhaps be helpful to them as well.
But now you've gone beyond that, haven't you? Like, you don't just work with other social workers to encourage journaling, but with regular people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that evolved over the years. For many years, I offered burnout prevention and self care resilience workshops to helping professionals, healthcare professionals, counselors, educators, people in high care, often trauma informed work were largely the groups of people I worked with, both in my individual coaching practice and in my training and consulting work. And over the years, I would include sort of modules inside these larger workshops where I would teach people about journaling and ways they could use it for their own well-being. And people always commented on how much they enjoyed that. And I really liked that too. I thought, well, what if I make a whole workshop about journaling for self-care versus just a little sliver in an existing workshop? And one thing led to another, and I started offering more and more journaling centered workshops. And I brought teams together to journal for reflective practice as groups in their organizational settings. I offered a lot of journaling workshops for employee wellness inside of various nonprofits, government organizations. And I really started to see not just the power and the transformational benefits of our own individual journaling practices, but also how doing it in groups with others with intention and a structure could be very helpful to building community, building compassion, building well-being in the group. So I'm passionate about that as well. And over time, I have facilitated over 200 community journaling events, including writing circles, many group coaching programs, writing for wellness, transformational writing salons, all kinds of different courses and workshops.
Well, thank you for that. So, in your work, what have you noticed changes most in people who begin journaling regularly, emotionally, cognitively, spiritually? Like, what opens up?
I've noticed lots of things open up, and one is being able to be more self compassionate, less judgmental, more accepting of the ebbs and flows of what it is to be a human being, the ups, the downs, the hardships, the joys. It becomes a place where people can hold more and also realize that something can be very difficult in the moment, but that it changes. And you see that in the journaling, that flexibility that is going on in our lives, the ever present state of change. And I think it builds people's capacity to cope with change, to deal with transition, to be very intentional. A lot of times people can be living on autopilot, just going through the motions, maybe living according to other people's expectations or agendas. And journaling puts us in direct contact with our own desires, our own instincts, our own impulses for what feels important in our lives. And it gives us the confidence to actually live according to them. So I've seen it be something where people start making life choices that feel more authentic to them, make changes that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise made because they start seeing this repeated mention of certain things in their journals, for example. I've seen it improve relationships because people get in a stronger relationship with themselves, a more self-loving, more self-reflective, self-aware relationship. And that carries over in terms of how they can be in relationship with others, people, their partners, their children, colleagues. And that ripple effect of strengthening relationship and reflective skills carries out into all areas of a person's life. People are often surprised. They're surprised that they're the ones that are journaling and that they'll get these new ideas, new insights, new instincts, and new things really open up in their lives. So it's very exciting. It's a very dynamic, profound, yet simple practice that really can change people's lives and their health. And that's no small thing to have something that helps us do that over and over again.
So, with all those benefits, right, everybody should be journaling.
I think it would be great if more people journal, but it's not necessarily a one size fits all. We know yoga is fantastic for health and well-being. We know that meditation is a wonderful tool and mindfulness, but it doesn't mean everyone will do it. We know journaling is an excellent life tool. People still need to find the things that resonate for them, that work for them.
Given that we're in such a productivity-focused world, are there people who really resist journaling?
I think resistance is normal anytime we're doing something that can help us know ourselves more deeply, grow ourselves, because it can be intimidating. What might I learn that I might not want to discover? We might be unsure of the value of it and be a bit trepidatious. Sometimes people are resistant because they have written in journals before, maybe as a young person, as a teenager. It's not an uncommon story for people to share that they've experienced a violation of trust with someone else reading their journal and even having negative consequences in their relationship. Let's say it was with a parent or a partner. So there can be this hesitation to want to put down one's true thoughts and feelings on the page for fear of discovery, not just discovery from oneself, but if there's some sense of a trust violation. So those things are understandable. And resistance is a normal part often of change. Journaling can bring about a lot of changes in our lives, and even positive changes can be things people might be a bit hesitant about.
So, you've developed a method called life source writing. So, can you give us an overview of how it works and why it's especially effective for accessing joy and clarity?
Life source writing is something I developed many years ago. It was back in 2009 or so. And I really wanted journaling to have some roadmap, not unlike going into a yoga class, for example. If you've ever done a yoga class, you walk into the studio, you don't just automatically go into warrior two or some asana or position. You go in, you connect with your breath. There's an arrival process, and then you go into your practice and go into the deepening of it and come out the other side with the completion of the class or the practice. And I wanted writing to have a similar pathway that we intentionally arrive. Here I am to do this, take this time for myself to do this writing. So the first step of life source writing is to arrive. It's a mindfulness practice. It's a recognition of being in the present moment. The second step is to relax. When we're relaxed, we're more able to be creative. We're more able to write. Writing can also help us relax. It's paradoxical. But this second step is to take a few breaths, feel the seat beneath you, get grounded, get centered, maybe set an intention for your writing time, what you would like to get out of it. And the third step is to write, and to write freely and openly, to write about thoughts and feelings. And the fourth step is a reflective step, an inquiry step, where you pause after you've done some writing. And these are known as reflective rites. There's many people who use these, so it's positioned inside this broader life source writing practice. That's where you can reread what you just wrote, or just it's fresh on your mind, you just did it. And you can ask yourself some questions that can serve as writing prompts. What do I notice about what I wrote? What do I feel about what I wrote? How might I like to take any action in my life based on any insights I'm having from the writing? So you just get curious and allow yourself to reflect on the writing you just did. And that can be very rich. More insights can come. that purposeful pause to reflect on the writing is really a very rich place. And the fifth step of life source writing is to affirm, which is a way of bringing gratitude, bringing completion to what you've just done. You might say something quietly to yourself, like, I'm grateful for this time to write and reflect. You're giving it a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's very simple to do. It's purposeful. It has a pathway. And any one of those steps has value in itself. So these things are strung together as a bit of a roadmap or a pathway to engage in what I call life source writing.
So this is more than just picking up a notebook when you have a spare minute and jotting some things down.
And not necessarily. It means picking up that notebook and saying, here I am. I'm taking this time for myself. Take a couple breaths. Start writing. Take a moment to jot down any insights you might have had from that and wrap it up. So it doesn't have to take long, and it doesn't have to be something that you do every time you write, but it can be something you can train yourself to just bring that bit of expansiveness, that bit of intention and process to your journaling practice. Again, if someone never does that, they can just open their journal, start writing, stop writing, and carry on with their day.
So what's the difference between journaling to vent and journaling for transformation? And how can coaches guide clients toward the latter?
Well, venting can be transformational. They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes there is great value in getting what's on the inside out, unburdening, clearing our minds, and sort of releasing some of the emotion that might feel heavy or difficult for us. But I always say we shouldn't make that the only thing we do in our journals. We don't want to pitch our tent there. There's a saying that's well circulated. I don't even know the original source. It's given different sources, but what we focus on grows. And so if in our journals we're always focusing on the things we want to vent about, which are typically the more painful, hard, frustrating, stressful things, we're kind of running that, wiring over and over and over again and entrenching that, in our thought patterns, in our emotional responses, physiological responses. So I always say it's good to give a little bit of time limit to that and not to say don't do it, but do it thoughtfully and do it in a not as a sort of go-to all the time thing we do, but rather give oneself permission to also journal for joy and positive emotions and positive memories and our hopes, our dreams, the things that we feel good about, proud about, things we want to acknowledge ourselves for. Because we can create all of those feel-good emotions, we can shift our mood, we can really help to mitigate some of the negative aspects of stress responses by purposely putting our journaling, which is putting our thinking, putting our emotions, putting our whole selves in the direction of more of what we want versus really focusing on things we maybe don't want. And that helps activate a lot of positive things in our lives and in our well-being. So I think it's important to be intentional with that and use prompts that can help us to be curious about joy. Simple prompts like, what brings me joy? What's 3 or 4 things that brought me joy this week? What's something that might bring me joy as I look ahead into this next week or this next month? Because what happens is we start to orient, not just when we're journaling, but we orient our lives to being aligned with cultivating joy and paying attention to joy and noticing joy. So it's something that is training your orientation and perspective in life, not just when you're journaling, but overall.
I'd never considered that you could journal for joy.
There's people who've written books about it. One of our IAJW Journal Council members is Joyce Chapman, and she has a Journaling for Joy workbook, and she's all about journaling for joy. There's other authors who focus on positive journaling and the role positive journaling can play in our mental health, our resilience. So there's actually very good reasons to journal for joy because it's well documented and well shown that by focusing on joy, a lot of other things get cultivated, like optimism and hope. And these things can support a positive worldview even during very distressing times. We could go as far as saying joy can even be an act of resistance. Our happiness can be an act of resistance where we're taking a strong stand for its importance in our life despite what's going on around us. And it gives us empowerment and personal agency. When we take a stand for our own joy, something very powerful happens in our lives and in our relationships. Just as an example, my mom suffers from advanced Alzheimer's, and my father died from Alzheimer's, so it's been a long and familiar road to love parents with this debilitating disease. And I have Friday morning video calls with my mom in her care home with the help of the staff there. And they can be very painful because she doesn't know who I am. But there's also just the moments of simplest joy, seeing her smile, hearing her laugh. Sometimes she'll just break into song randomly during these video calls. And I'll take a few minutes after these calls to just jot down. I'll sometimes write about, what was difficult about it or some of my own grief in losing my mom this way. But I'll also take a moment to write what it felt like to see her toothless grin light up. She has, used to wear partial dentures, and she would be mortified to know her teeth are not, those dentures are not in her mouth right now, but that ship has sailed. But that there's something so innocent and precious about this, woman I love smiling back at me with half her teeth. And so, in other words, we can be intentional at noticing what still feels joyful, or at the very least positive or fine, even in the midst of very difficult things. And that helps to foster our resilience. And that changes how we perceive what's going on and how we perceive ourselves with what's going on.
I imagine that most people when they start journaling, they journal about the difficult moments in their lives. Do you find that is it a bit of a difficult transition to get them to start to journal for joy?
Yeah. There's almost a permission. It's like, am I doing this right if I'm writing about good things and not just all the crappy things that are going on? Like, isn't journaling supposed to be the dumping ground for, getting out the hard stuff? Because and it's a little bit how we think about it and what we give ourselves permission to do with it. Because it's not right or wrong to write about this or write about that, but it can be more helpful. You can experiment. Take 5 minutes and write about all your problems. Take 5 minutes and write about moments of joy, memories of joy, things that might bring you joy, and just notice how you feel. And some days it might have felt better to write about your problems and to get them out and sort them out, find solutions, because when we write about problems or difficult things, or we invite clients to do that, it's not purposeless. It's not just venting, because sometimes writing about those hardships help us find solutions, help us gain new insights that can inform new choices or actions that we want to take. So journaling isn't just this passive sort of purging on the page. It's an intentional practice that helps us take action in our life based on the awareness that comes through the writing itself. And I think that's why it's such a powerful coaching tool, why it's such a powerful tool for any kind of transformational work, including the personal growth work we do for ourselves, but also in doing that work with other people. My colleague, Eric Maisel, who's a world-renowned creativity coach, created a program called the Art of Journal Coaching, where we teach other coaches and helping professionals, wellness professionals, how to bring the transformational power of journaling into their work with others. Because if we look at how we're trying to support people to make changes, take inspired action in their life, clarify their goals, be in a growth-oriented process in their lives and work, journaling touches on all of those things, and hence it can be a very powerful tool in our coaching toolkit. It can be even how we do our coaching. We can be journal coaches, where journaling is the primary tool.
So do you encourage writing by hand?
I do. Yeah. Only because it is a break away from the computer. It's a break away from screens. It has that intimate sort of scribe feeling. There is some research around the benefits of writing by hand. But in saying that, I also think it's important to do whatever works for a person. So, for example, some people have very bad arthritis and it's painful to write by hand. Well, it's fine to go and open a password protected Word document because some people like that sort of sense of security that can come from online journaling or password protected documents. It's how they deal with that vulnerability of it. So always say whatever will help you do it, whatever is the least friction. If you don't want to handwrite, if you don't like writing, then type your journal. If you don't like typing, you could even audio record your journal. If you don't really like a lot of words, you can even do art journaling. So there's lots of different ways to make this a flexible practice.
Yeah. So you've worked extensively in burnout prevention. So how can journaling help people, especially leaders or caregivers, notice and intervene in their own emotional overwhelm?
Well, burnout has a pathway, it has a trajectory, and it doesn't just happen after one bad day or one busy week or it's a pattern and it evolves over time when there has been very subtle deprivations of the self. So it tends to happen to professionals, people who are very ambitious, who are purpose driven, who want to make a difference. They're on fire. They want to do something and they're serving that ideal every day. They're serving it as a nurse, a social worker, a coach, a teacher in a classroom. And so there can be this serving of the ideal. And through that, there can be a sort of turning away from the needs of the self because the work is so focused on the needs of the other. And that might look like maybe you used to take a lunch break every day and now you don't. Maybe you went home at the end of the day and now you work late hours and you miss dinner and you used to exercise, but now you don't because you're too tired. And so that over time, there's this erosion of self-caring activities in service to the ideal that's being served. And that can decline and spiral down into a full burnout where people are physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually exhausted and have a number of very compelling symptoms that make doing what they're doing very difficult and compromise one's own health. And journaling, by virtue that it is something one does for themselves, you're not journaling for your partner, you're not journaling for your child or your client, you're journaling for yourself. And there is that showing up for yourself that happens with journaling, which is different than the subtle neglect and turning away from and potentially abandoning one's own needs that can be so much a part of burnout. And so giving yourself that time to pause and reflect, to replenish, to renew through journaling, all of these things can happen when we journal, can really help to mitigate that burnout trajectory. Because in that moment that we're journaling, we're saying, I'm important, my needs are important, taking time for myself is important. While we're journaling, we're doing that and we're not doing this. And there's a whole cascading effect that can happen that can be positive from that one simple act of taking that pause for yourself. That's very simple answer to a complex question, a complex phenomenon, because we also know that burnout isn't just at the individual level. Burnout is very systemic. It's very structural. It's about working in under-resourced environments and poor leadership. There's many institutional and organizational workplace factors that contribute to both the onset and the prevalence of professional burnout. So by no means do I suggest if, an overworked nurse working in an under-resourced hospital, if she journals every day, she's going to prevent burnout. Not necessarily, but it's at least going to be something that's still in one's control to try to do for oneself.
Yes, I imagine that when you journal in a situation like that, then you can start to notice when you're spiraling down and not have to hit rock bottom before you realize that you're in full burnout.
Yeah. It helps you see yourself more often with greater clarity. So you can notice, especially if you understand what some of the symptoms are, It's like, oh, I'm feeling, very depleted, exhausted. I have short patience. It's harder to make decisions. My startle reflexes, responding to noises around me. I can't sleep well at night. All these things. If you're noticing some of these symptoms being reflected as you write, they can become invitations to do what you need to do to turn that around, because it's much easier to prevent the onset or the full-blown burnout than it is to recover once it's already happened.
And there's something about having it all down on paper that makes it real, rather
Exactly.
than have it going round and round in your head.
Yeah. And also not beating oneself up, not writing, oh, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, what's wrong with me? No, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed. That's an understandable consequence due to the nature of this work, due to the nature of my circumstance. What do I need? How can I meet that need? And start to let the journaling itself help you come up with some of those answers, because those answers are within. We often know what we need, but we need a chance to think about it and access it. And journaling can help us do that. I did this recently where I'd been just exceptionally busy and I was writing. And in the writing, I noticed how I was writing about how tired I felt. I noticed that I've been writing about feeling tired for the past 4 days. What do I need? Well, I need to cancel this upcoming thing. You can literally start to problem solve. Those insights come through the patterns and the conversation we're having with ourselves in our journals through the writing.
So, for coaches who want to introduce journaling to their clients, what's your advice for keeping the practice approachable but still meaningful?
Keeping it simple, not overcomplicating it, bringing time right in the coaching session to journal. So it's not necessarily something someone has to do outside of a coaching session, but pausing right in the coaching session and inviting people to journal with a prompt that's relevant to what the coaching is. So you might even start with what's something that you feel good about since our last coaching session. What's something that's been challenging since the last coaching session. You can use it journaling as a check-in, because speaking is different than writing. And writing gives people a chance to think and gather themselves. And then, you can let that become part of what informs the coaching session. Lots of coaches start with, what do you hope to get out of this session? You can give a client 1 or 2 minutes to journal about that, because they've often come from their busy workday, their lives, and then all of a sudden they're being asked to think and answer questions and do all the work that happens in coaching. Some of that work can be done with journaling.
And helps them slow down.
Yeah, they slow down, they arrive, it gives them time to think without having to speak. And I've just seen it be very positive right inside of the coaching.
Okay, and finally, as we wrap up, if someone listening has never journaled before, what's a small, manageable first step they can take to begin?
I really like short writes, so set a timer for 5 minutes and get a journal, separate notebook that you can just turn to and simply be in the moment. Right now, I notice. Right now, I feel. Just little sentence starter prompts that kind of take you into that blank page, because that blank page can feel daunting. People often wonder, what do I write about? Am I doing it correctly? And journaling is about the process. It's not about perfection. It's about showing up for yourself. It's about being willing to express your thoughts and feelings as openly and honestly as you can through the writing. And even simple things like lists, making a list of 3 things that you're grateful for from the day. If you did that every day, you'd feel the benefits of that. 3 things that brought you joy, simple pleasures in your day. Maybe it was that cup of coffee you had first thing in the morning, or like rubbing your dog's belly. They don't have to be big things. Journaling can capture the ordinary moments of these extraordinary lives that we're living. So just to start simple. It doesn't have to take long. Let it be enjoyable. Wrap that sense of renewal and comfort and well-being around yourself while you journal. And just let it be a companion practice and see where it takes you.
So thank you, Lynda. That's a great way to wrap up our conversation. So what's the best way for listeners to learn more about you and your work?
Well, our website is ia-monk.com. lyndamonk.jw.org. And I also have another website, lyndamonk.com, which is more on my burnout prevention work, a site that's being updated as we speak. And it's lyndamonk.com. And I have lots of free resources there to support you to go to the page. I love prompts. They give us a place of inquiry, and they're powerful questions and easy questions. And you can journal your whole life with prompts.
So thank you, Lynda. I'm so grateful for your time on the show today.
Thank you, Irena. And go well, everyone. Thank you for your meaningful work you do in our world as coaches.
So thank you, everyone, for listening. As Lynda and I talked about today, journaling is more than just putting pen to paper. It's a science-backed, soul-nourishing practice that helps us process, reframe, and grow. Whether you're writing about what hurts, what's possible, or simply what's true in the moment, you're strengthening the neural pathways that support resilience, clarity, and joy. And perhaps most importantly, journaling reminds us that we can be both the author and the reader of our own lives. We can retell our stories in ways that heal us. We can write toward a version of ourselves that is more self-aware, more compassionate, and more connected. If you've never journaled, or if it's been a while, I hope today's conversation inspires you to give it a try. Your next breakthrough might just be waiting on the page.